The Isle is an ever-evolving game, constantly adding new systems, new dinosaurs, and otherwise new elements to the gameplay that help enhance what's already there. But there's one system that's been in the game for quite a while, but seemingly no one knows how to use. It's gone through several revamps, and it's a system that's actually been highly requested for this series. So that's a system we're going to go over today. It's ironically a system that I personally have had a lot of experience with in the early days of the Isle, but recently just haven't used it very often, so I had to reacquaint myself with it specifically for the purposes of this video. So, without further ado, I bring you the Isle Survival Guide Episode 4. Nesting. Now, nesting is a unique system in the fact that, unlike the other systems such as the scent system or the camouflage and skin system, you never really have to use nesting for anything. Anything at all. You can go the entirety of the time that you play the Isle and never actually use the nesting system. You can go 200 hours and never need to use it. And for the most part, unless you actively seek out to do it on purpose or actively seek to be nested in, you never really have to be. Because this system is completely optional and not remotely necessary to gameplay, it means that most people haven't really attempted to use the system that feel unfamiliar or uncomfortable with it. And that makes sense. The system itself is quite time consuming, and today we're going to cover just about every aspect of it. So, let's get into the very first part of nesting. And that's building a nest. Now, just before we get into this, I'd also like to say that I'm only going to be covering nesting as it actually applies in-game. Some servers have particular rules around certain creatures nesting. Isla Nicta, for a lot of the larger animals in the game, you have to have a mate of some kind. While something along the lines of a Utah and Dilo can produce asexually, for the most part, you're only allowed to nest if you have a mate. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into how to build a nest. And it isn't very complicated, believe it or not. You have to be an adult creature of some kind and a female. Now, I also believe you can do this as a subadult apex, or at least a creature that has two separate growth stages, meaning you go from juvenile to subadult into adult. Subadults, I believe, can nest, but on most servers it's not allowed. But building a nest is pretty simple. You find terrain that the game allows you to nest on, and you click B. Each dinosaur, for the most part, has a semi-unique, or mostly unique, nesting animation, and they will build a nest until it's fully complete and the animation will stop. Now, once you are done physically making the nest, you now have the ability to manage it, and that is the second part of nesting. Managing the nest, and probably the most important part. Now, for no other reason than it just kind of helps me a little bit, we're going to break the nest itself into two separate kind of areas. That's nest stats, which is less important than most things, and the actual eggs in that side of the nest. I'm just going to call that the egg side. Now, on the nest stat sides has important information and some pretty unimportant information. It gives you the matriarch, being the mother, the patriarch, which is unknown for most situations, I'm sure, and the health of the nest, which actually is important. Keep track of the health of the nest, because creatures can come along and destroy the nest. Now, probably the two, if in my opinion, most important ones being food and incubation. Food is the amount of stored food that a hatchling can eat from the nest without having to leave and find an actual food source such as a carcass or gore. Food can be stored up to 300 units of food, which is a lot, and will probably cover at least 2 or 3 hatchlings completely to the point where they become juveniles. Incubation is the incubation period of the egg, or at least the current egg that is being incubated. And offspring is incredibly self-explanatory. At 0 out of 4. You can have 4 offspring. It really doesn't get much more simple than that. Now, on the egg side comes just a more visual representation of kind of what's on the nest stat side, except you have the bottom column and the eggs themselves. The bottom column is self-explanatory. Back gets you out of the menu. Store food allows you to store food from your own hunger bar. So be careful when storing food. You can actually starve yourself to death on accident if you're not paying attention. Destroy if you want to move nest locations, and the actual egg prompts. When you initially start a nest, all eggs are going to be dormant until they start gestating and eventually incubate. And here's the part of nesting that can become kind of a time sink, with the fact that in order to gestate and then incubate an egg, you have to lay on top of the nest for up to 30 minutes per egg. Now, how that will look is that you will lay down on the nest, clicking the H key, which puts your dinosaur into a resting position. This allows you to recover health faster, stamina faster, and also allows the nest to actually start gestating and incubating eggs. Once you lay down on the nest, the gestation period for the very top egg, or one of the eggs more or less, will begin, and it will actually have the prompt saying gestating. After the gestation period is complete, then will begin the incubation period, and these would take about 15 minutes each respectively, totaling to 30 minutes. After 30 minutes have passed, you get the prompt that's not gestating or incubation, it's invite. Invite allows you to invite any person on the server to be nested in as the creature you have nested as. And if the invite is accepted, they become hatchling versions of whatever creature you've nested as. Now, be aware that hatchlings are actually at a stage smaller than juveniles, meaning that they do have to grow into being a juvenile. But when they're hatchlings is the only time that they're actually allowed to eat from the food you've stored within your nest, regardless of what type of dinosaur you are. This is something to consider so that you don't plan on feeding your young after they're done being hatchlings through the nest. Once they become juveniles and beyond that adults or even subadults if you're an apex, they're not allowed to eat from the nest anymore. So please take this into consideration and make sure you plan accordingly. But with that out of the way, congratulations, you've successfully nested in an actual player as your offspring. And from there, you can help them grow up into an adult version of you, and maybe they can go off on their own and make their own nest. But that really is it. That's the nesting system as a whole. It's a system that more or less looks complex on the surface because of the time requirement needed. 4 eggs is 2 hours of sitting there on the nest. And that is a fairly long time to do nothing but watch young versions of you, basically. Now, taking care of hatchlings is something that we are going to kind of address in this video because when am I ever going to talk about it? Parenting isn't necessarily a video that I think I need to dedicate something to. So let's get into step 3 of nesting, and that is picking a proper nesting spot and taking care of your hatchlings and offspring. Now, in my opinion, you want to find something not necessarily toward the edge of a map, but in an area that is either very not frequently traveled, or if frequently traveled, more or less out of the visible way of that particular path. An area I can think of that's incredibly dangerous to set up a nest is somewhere like docks. You have so many Utahraptors in the area that if you're not a Utahraptor, you're probably going to be picked off and killed. Or if you are a Utahraptor, the juveniles are free meals for the bigger carnivores that come to eat the actual Utahs. I personally picked a location that was somewhat frequently traveled enough that we had a steady flow of dinosaurs coming through, made sure that the exact location was actually out of visible range of the water source that was nearby. It means so that I was safe from things that passed by as long as I didn't make a sound. But not just out of the way, you also want to find something near water sources. Hatchlings will dehydrate very quickly, and you want to be aware of this if you have them. But you also want to make sure that you ferry them down to water sources and back up. But what I mean by that is walk with them to the water source, and if need be, you be the distraction to the bigger carnivore, or whatever happens to come along the way, while they go and escape. They're small enough that even small shrubs and brush will probably cover them fairly easily, and if you're like me and you always camouflage your creatures in some way or another, they'll pretty much be hidden regardless of what happens to you. So, I guess final piece of advice is that I've kind of been giving more or less suggestions of predators nesting because they do have a harder time doing it than herbivores. Predators, my best suggestion would be find a place that is frequently traveled enough that you're not going to be starved for food, but also make sure that you're out of the way and not within visual range of a lot of these bigger predators that are most likely going to travel through there. If you're a herbivore, then actually take the opposite of my advice. Find a watering hole that is so far out of the way no one would look for it. Herbivore food is a lot easier to find and way more abundant, so you probably have a better chance of hiding your young way out of the way rather than keeping them very close to populace such as other dinosaurs like the Tyrannosaurus and the Giga. And for the most part, that's nesting, and I can definitely see why I got as many requests to cover it as I did. I mean, it's a system that, unless you actively seek out to use it, you never have to use for regular gameplay. And because of that, I'm guessing there's a decent portion of the Isles community that hasn't really messed it around with nesting all that much. But I bet there's a substantial margin that also has used it quite a bit. But I'm glad regardless that this video is probably going to help some people at least understand nesting a bit more, or maybe even help them succeed with their nesting that's failed in the past. And as for me, I'm actually pretty happy with the nesting system, and overall I think I'm probably going to keep using it a lot more often than I was. For the most part, I'm probably going to keep using it as a Utah and Dilo, so if you'd like to nest in kind of under my pack, then hey, message me in the comment section of this video and maybe we can work something out. But hey guys, thanks for watching, and this has been the Isle Survival Guide Episode 4, Nesting. This has been the Jays of 77, and I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, I'm really sorry for this kind of being a really delayed video, but I've had a lot of health, I wouldn't necessarily say issues, but discoveries happened within the last couple of weeks, being more or less this last week specifically. I've basically gone between 3 different specialists that I finally got one of them to tell me what I had, and long story short, I'm kind of now living with a new condition I didn't really realize I had for a really long time. I just kind of chalked it up to something else, so really sorry this video took so long, and thank you guys for being patient, and as always, I cannot thank you guys enough for the support on all of my videos, and I guess I don't know what else to say. Just thank you guys, thank you for supporting me, thank you for the wait, and I will promise you I will try to make sure that the next video is not this late. I've just been running around like a madman the last few days, especially the last week when I had to make all these appointments and everything, so thanks for waiting guys, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys next time. And just remember, none of this is possible without you guys, so thank you.